The movie opens up in a lab where a rat accidentally gets trapped in a cage. There, it sniffs something and tries to investigate when, suddenly, an unseen force rips it to pieces and consumes it. Meanwhile, our main character, a scientist named Sebastian, is working on a chemical formula on his computer, but sadly, his simulation fails. However, after he peeks at his beautiful neighbor, he gets an idea and reworks the formula, making it stable this time. Excited about the solution, he calls his co-worker Linda and showcases his successful chemical formula to her. He even jokingly mentions that they should get ready to receive the Nobel Prize soon. After hanging up the call, Linda wakes up another man, Matthew, who also works at the same lab. The two appear to be having an affair, but Linda wants to keep it a secret until the right time. In the next scene, they get dressed and reach the heavily guarded lab, where Sebastian uses his fingerprint and password to enter. Inside, they observe animals that are invisible and can only be seen through thermal imaging. Matthew interacts with a gorilla named Isabel, which clearly appears to be agitated. He puts on his thermal goggles and attempts to calm her down, but ends up getting bitten in his hand. Following this, Isabel runs out of the cage and creates havoc in the office. Sebastian and Matthew chase the invisible gorilla throughout the lab until they corner her. Without wasting any time, Sebastian then tranquilizes her, but Sarah, a vet, objects to injecting the untested serum. However, Sebastian brushes off her concerns and rudely says that she was hired for her expertise and not for her animal-loving nature. Later, Linda prepares the serum that Sebastian developed to make the invisible animals visible again. She then carefully injects it into Isabel's veins. The serum works temporarily, making her partially visible, but soon she goes into cardiac arrest. This causes panic among all the employees, prompting them to use a defibrillator on the gorilla. Fortunately, the plan works, and Isabel comes back to life. The serum also stabilizes her heartbeat, making her fully visible. Everyone in the lab erupts in joy, and Sarah is optimistic about Isabel's recovery. After this, they all go to a restaurant to celebrate. The following week, Sebastian presents their research findings to a Pentagon committee. He says that his team has successfully created a formula that can make animals go invisible. However, when Dr. Kramer inquires if they have developed a reversion, Sebastian lies, claiming they haven't figured it out yet. This obviously surprises Linda and Matthew, but they decide to remain silent for now. Dr. Kramer then warns the team that if they don't find the reversion soon, they will be replaced. Outside, Linda asks Sebastian the reason for lying, and he explains that if they reported their progress, the Pentagon would take over the project completely. He also reveals his idea to proceed with unauthorized human trials to change the world and potentially win the Nobel Prize. This concerns Matthew, as he is fearful about the consequences, but Sebastian dismisses his concerns. Later, Sebastian informs his team about the risky plan, and Sarah can't believe that such a dangerous experiment got the committee's approval. However, Sebastian is determined to proceed no matter what happens. He then declares that he will be the prime subject for the experiment. On the day of the procedure, Matthew tries to talk Sebastian out of it, but he mocks him. Soon, the team prepares Sebastian for the experiment, connecting him to an IV and restraining him on the bed. He admits feeling tense with an elevated heart rate. As they irradiate the serum and bring it over to Sebastian, he insists on injecting it himself to avoid blaming others if something goes wrong. After the injection, everyone anxiously watches for results, but there's no immediate change in Sebastian's body. But after a few minutes, he suddenly begins convulsing as patches of invisibility appear on his skin. He expresses more pain than expected, and his vital signs become erratic, indicating he's on the verge of a seizure. With the continuing invisibility process, the remaining members prepare the defibrillator for any emergencies. Matthew advises them to wait as they see Sebastian stabilizing during the transformation. Finally, he becomes completely invisible, and a technician named Frank marks the moment when the phase shift occurs. Although Matthew reassures them that Sebastian is physically okay, he is unconscious due to the traumatic experience. 17 hours later, Sebastian wakes up in pain and asks Linda and Matthew to turn off the lights, as he is having difficulty opening his eyes. However, they explain that he can't close his transparent eyelids. Sebastian then goes to the mirror and later returns to the lab area, where he startles everyone. They use thermal goggles to see him, and Matthew and Linda take him back to his room, setting up observation monitors. Later, Sarah falls asleep during her shift, and Sebastian sneaks into the observation room to touch her. When she wakes up, he pretends to be in bed. Sarah shares her concerns with Linda, who is unsure if it really happened. Later, Matthew wants to talk to Sebastian about it, but Sarah advises against it. During medical checkups, Sebastian continues to make Sarah uncomfortable. The team discusses their worries about Sebastian's behavior as an invisible man. Even at night during Linda's shift, Sebastian messes with her and makes inappropriate advances, which she rejects. The next day, the team attempts to use the serum to phase Sebastian back, but he starts choking. and his organs appear and disappear erratically. They manage to stabilize him but decide to keep his condition a secret from the committee. Since he will remain invisible for a while, they create a synthetic mask for him, with holes for his eyes and mouth. Sebastian sees himself in the mirror with the mask on and gets surprised. In the next scene, Linda and Matthew try to work on the reversion serum formula from home, but struggle to figure it out. Matthew admits he's not as brilliant as Sebastian, who could jump to the right conclusion easily. As the days go by, Sebastian becomes physically and psychologically sick due to the continuous testing. He argues with Matthew about it, but Linda comforts him. Feeling unsatisfied with their efforts, Sebastian decides to leave the lab that night. He informs his colleague Carter, but the latter tries to stop him due to the rules. However, Sebastian insists he can change the rules because he is the one in charge. He then leaves the compound, promising to return in a couple of hours. After this, Carter calls Linda to inform her about Sebastian's departure. Meanwhile, Sebastian evades the police guard outside the compound and drives off. At a traffic light, he frightens a couple of kids nearby. Next, Sebastian goes back to his apartment to collect some of his belongings. While he is at it, he notices his beautiful neighbor undressing in her apartment. Realizing that he is completely invisible, an evil idea strikes Sebastian's mind. He removes his mask and sneaks inside the neighbor's apartment. Then he stares at her for a while before inappropriately assaulting her. Moments later, Linda arrives at Sebastian's apartment, finds his mask, and realizes that he has been there. At the lab, the team prepares to find him, discussing the need to keep his condition a secret from the outside world. Unexpectedly, Sebastian returns to the lab, claiming he only went to his apartment to get some things. Linda confronts him about what she saw, and Matthew questions his decision to go out in public. In response, Sebastian asserts his authority as the project leader and defends his actions. When he starts getting aggressive, Linda threatens to report him to the committee if he leaves the lab again. The following day, Matthew thinks he has found a solution and explains it to the team, but the simulation breaks down at 95%. This makes Sebastian very angry, and he storms out of the room. Later, he tampers with the security camera to make it seem like he's in the lab. He then goes to Linda's apartment to spy on her, but at the same time, Matthew arrives there. Sebastian is livid by what he sees, so he smashes the window. Linda immediately suspects that it is Sebastian, so she calls the lab to check on the cameras. However, the rigged cameras show that he is still in his bed. Meanwhile, a deranged Sebastian arrives at the lab and brutally kills a dog. The next day, when Sarah enters the animal department to give them food, she discovers the dead dog and confronts Sebastian. However, he casually denies any involvement. The security camera also shows him in bed all night. But Linda is certain that Sebastian tampered with it. She then calls everyone to the lab, and they collectively decide to inform their seniors about the situation. Unbeknownst to them, Sebastian is standing outside, eavesdropping on their plan. In the next scene, Linda and Matthew arrive at their senior doctor, Kramer's house, and reveal everything to him. The latter gets enraged at the unauthorized experiments, but agrees to call the necessary people to take action. Unbeknownst to them, an invisible Sebastian is observing everything from outside. After Linda and Matthew leave, Dr. Kramer tries to make the call, but the phone line appears to be down. Then, out of nowhere, Sebastian appears, drags Kramer to the pool, and mercilessly drowns him in the water. The next day, when Linda returns to the lab, Sebastian startles her, saying it will be a busy day. Matthew reveals that he came back at 3 a.m. and has been wandering through the lab since then. Shortly after, the two get to know that Kramer mysteriously drowned in his pool last night. Shocked, Linda tries to call the general, but the line drops, and they discover that they have no connection to the outside world. Soon, the group realizes that Sebastian has removed their access, leaving them trapped in the lab. While searching for him, they are horrified to find a technician's dead body outside the door. As the group starts panicking, an invisible Sebastian confronts them and says, "I enjoy this power now," but Linda is having none of it, so she powers up the motion detectors and spots Sebastian on the monitor. Matthew and Carter go to find him while the rest keep watch. However, Sebastian surprises them, and Matthew accidentally shoots a pipe, making Sebastian visible due to the vapor. An intense brawl then ensues, which ends with poor Carter getting fatally injured. In the aftermath, Sebastian escapes and locks Matthew in the tunnel. He remains on Matthew's side, making himself invisible by raising the temperature and rendering the goggles useless. Linda goes out to help Matthew, and the rest try to get Carter. After a while, Sarah and Frank find Carter, but unfortunately he has lost a lot of blood from his wounds. Sarah goes to get blood for a transfusion while Frank stays with Carter. Unfortunately, as she is retrieving the blood packets from the lab, she hears Sebastian entering the room. Acting quickly, she pours the blood on the floor and waits, hoping it can make him visible, but he doesn't show up. As she moves to the other door, he surprises her and grabs her from the other side. Sarah pours the last remaining pack on him, but he overpowers her and mercilessly kills her. On the other hand, Linda and Matthew find Frank just as Carter passes away due to excessive blood loss. Together, they return to the lab in search of Sarah, only to find her dead body. After a while, as Frank is distracted, Sebastian sneaks up behind him and kills him with a metal crowbar. He also injures Matthew with it and locks both him and Linda in the freezer. Panicked, Linda manages to close Matthew's wound using duct tape. She then tries to open the door of the freezer but fails. Meanwhile, Sebastian prepares to make his escape, gathering materials to blow up the lab. He mixes a concoction and throws it like a grenade to test it. Sometime later, Linda creates a magnet with the defibrillator, which allows her to finally open the door by pulling the lever. She gets Matthew out and starts a fire to warm him up. She then grabs a flamethrower and begins searching for Sebastian. On the other hand, Sebastian sets up a bomb using the concoction, setting it to go off in 5 minutes. To his dismay, when Sebastian tries to escape in the elevator, Linda catches up to him and sets him on fire. As Sebastian runs away, Linda activates the sprinkler system, hoping she can easily see him coming this time. Sadly, Sebastian ambushes her again. He viciously attacks her and attempts to choke her with his leg, but Matthew arrives in the nick of time and knocks Sebastian out. However, the evil man gets right back up and swings his crowbar at the duo. Fortunately, he completely misses and ends up striking the electric grid instead. As a result, he is fried to a pulp. Believing that Sebastian has finally died, Linda and Matthew start searching for the hidden bomb but fail to locate it. Moments later, the bomb detonates, but they manage to hide in a safe spot. The duo then tries to escape the building using an emergency ladder through the elevator shaft. As they begin climbing, Sebastian unexpectedly reappears and grabs Linda by her leg. In their struggle, they fall back onto the elevator, sending it plummeting back down. Despite their grave injuries, they keep fighting when, all of a sudden, the deranged Sebastian leans in and kisses Linda. Taking advantage of the distraction, Linda grabs hold of the elevator cable and releases the lift. Because of this, Sebastian falls into the raging fire below, while Linda climbs to safety. The movie ends with Linda and Matthew reuniting and walking out of the building alive.